Today, we're diving into the story of one of the most powerful symbols of the 20th century, the Berlin Wall. It's a story about division, for sure, but it's really about something much bigger, the unstoppable human desire for freedom.
I mean, really, just try to picture that. You go to sleep one night, and when you wake up, a massive barrier has appeared. Your school, your friends, maybe even your grandparents are suddenly on the other side, and you can't get to them. This isn't a movie plot. For the people of Berlin, this was their shocking new reality.
So the big question is, how on earth does something like this even happen? Well, to understand the wall, we need to rewind a bit, all the way back to the end of World War II, which basically created the perfect storm for this kind of division. Okay, so after the war, the winning countries, the US, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, carved Germany up into 4 zones. They did the same thing with the capital city, Berlin. But here's the really crucial part. The entire city of Berlin was located deep inside the Soviet-controlled part of East Germany. That little detail is going to cause some major problems down the road. This whole situation was a key part of what we call the Cold War. It wasn't a hot war with active battles, but more like a global high-stakes standoff between 2 superpowers. On one side, you had the democratic West, all about personal freedom. On the other, the communist East, where the state controlled pretty much everything. And Berlin, it became the #1 flashpoint where these 2 worlds literally crashed into each other. And you can really see the difference here. West Berlin was this vibrant island of democracy and opportunity. Life was pretty good. But in East Berlin, things were much tougher. The state had tight control over your life, and there were often shortages of basic things you'd need. So it's pretty easy to guess which side looked more attractive to people. And people absolutely voted with their feet. A massive brain drain started. We're talking thousands of doctors, teachers, and engineers. The very people needed to run a country, just walking across the open border into the West every single day. This was a huge economic problem for East Germany, and frankly, it was a massive embarrassment. They knew they had to do something drastic to stop it. Now, instead of making life in the East better so people would want to stay, the government chose a much darker path. They decided to trap their own citizens. And they did it with shocking speed and total secrecy. You hear that? That's what the leader of East Germany told the entire world just 2 months before the wall went up. It was a complete and total lie. Secretly, a plan called Operation Rose was already underway to seal the border for good. Let's just walk through how fast this all happened. On the night of August 12th, while the city was asleep, soldiers were given their secret orders. At midnight, they fanned out across the city. By the early morning, they were literally ripping up streets and rolling out miles and miles of barbed wire. When the sun came up on August 13th, Berlin was cut in 2. Just like that. The human cost was immediate. Families were instantly split apart. People who had just popped over to the other side of the city for dinner suddenly couldn't get home. The subway system was cut in half. It was just absolute chaos and heartbreak. That first barrier of barbed wire, well, that was just the beginning. Over the next couple of decades, it grew from a simple fence into a terrifyingly complex and deadly fortress. So first, it was just wire, but people still got through. So they built a simple brick wall, but people still found ways over. Finally, the government built the version we all picture in our heads, a massive 12-foot-high wall of reinforced concrete. And behind that wall, they built the most chilling part of the entire system. You see, it wasn't just one wall. In most places, it was 2. And the empty, heavily guarded space in between was known as the Death Strip. The name really tells you everything you need to know. It was engineered for one single purpose: to stop anyone from getting across alive. And just look at the details here. The ground was fine sand, so guards could easily spot footprints. The whole area was lit up by massive searchlights. There were more than 300 watchtowers, all staffed by guards who had orders to shoot to kill. Not to mention the attack dogs, beds of nails, and deep ditches to stop cars. It was a full-on military zone in the middle of a city. So what was it like living in the shadow of this thing? For people in East Berlin, it meant a life filled with constant fear and surveillance, but also some incredible acts of courage. A huge part of that fear came from the Stasi, the East German secret police. Their entire job was to spy on their own citizens. They had a huge network of informants. Your neighbor, your coworker, maybe even a family member could be reporting on you. You never knew who to trust, which made planning an escape almost impossibly dangerous. But that didn't stop people from trying. And the ways they tried were just mind-blowing.
People dug long tunnels under the wall. They built a hot air balloon out of scraps of fabric. They crammed themselves into tiny secret compartments in cars. They even built a mini submarine. The sheer creativity born out of desperation is incredible. But so many of these attempts ended in tragedy. The story of Peter Fichter is one of the most heartbreaking. He and his friend made a run for the wall in broad daylight. The friend made it over, but Peter was shot by the guards. He fell back into the death strip. And for nearly an hour, people on both sides could only watch as he lay there and bled to death. He was only 18 years old. His death was broadcast around the world, and it became a brutal symbol of what the wall really was.
Now, for the few people who could cross legally, like diplomats, the most famous crossing point was Checkpoint Charlie. And this sign was a constant, stark reminder that you were stepping from one world into a completely different one. This spot was so tense that at one point, American and Soviet tanks literally faced off here, nose to nose, in a standoff that could have easily triggered a world war.
For 28 long years, that wall stood as an ugly scar across Berlin. But you can't contain the human spirit forever. And in 1989, that spirit finally broke free. By the fall of 1989, East Germans had had enough. Huge, peaceful protests were happening all over the country. The government was losing its grip. Then, on the night of November 9th, an official made a fumbled, confusing announcement on TV that basically said the border was open. At first, no one believed it, but then a few brave people went to check, and the guards, having no orders, just opened the gates. The scenes that followed were just pure joy. People streamed across, climbed on top of the wall, and celebrated with strangers. Today, the city is whole again. That horrifying death strip is now filled with parks, bike paths, and buildings. Most of the wall is gone, but they've left small sections standing as memorials. They're powerful, permanent reminders of the high price of division. Which brings us to a final thought. The Berlin Wall may be gone, but the ideas it represented, control, division, and the fight for basic liberty are still very much with us. So what does this concrete scar from history teach us about the freedoms that we might just take for granted every single day?